What does a song look like? The images you see before you are not the aurora borealis. These are songs, their fundamental essence exposed like never before. Hi, I'm Jamashi, and today I am going to show you a way to visualize music that is just as informative as it is beautiful. A pictorial representation of music that serves as a magnifying glass, bringing stunning clarity to the finest details of a song's production, and which may help you improve your own music. The establishment does not want you to see this, but I'm going to show you anyway. So what exactly are we looking at? Just a heads up, I'm going to be playing multiple audio samples throughout this video, so there will be some occasional fluctuations in volume. For the most enjoyable listening experience, especially if you're wearing headphones, set your volume to a level that allows you to comfortably listen to the following audio. If you don't care about your ears, feel free to skip this part. Let's start with the basics. This is a digital audio waveform. It contains all the information we need to recreate anything from Bach to Benson Boone. Information that is used to generate an electrical signal that in turn causes a speaker cone to vibrate and produce sound. If we look very closely at our waveform, we can see that it is made up of discrete points, or samples. These samples occur at discrete intervals of time, which is determined by the sample rate of the audio. The sample rate is measured in hertz and tells you how many samples occur per second of audio. Samples also possess discrete amplitude values. The number of possible amplitude values available to the samples is determined by the bit depth of the audio, where the number of amplitude levels is equal to 2 to the bit depth. In this example, we are dealing with 16-bit audio, so there are 2 to the 16 possible amplitude levels. Now we will take our first step to turn this humble waveform into the beautiful plots I have shown you. First, we must convert our amplitudes to dBFS, or decibels below full scale. If you've worked with audio production to any extent, you are likely familiar with this scale, as it's used in various aspects of audio production, including your DAW's peak level meter. 0 dB is the maximum digital amplitude value. It represents a ceiling that samples cannot break through. All the other amplitude levels are measured relative to this digital maximum. Pure silence is negative infinity dB, but there is a minimum digital amplitude value, the quietest level just above pure silence, and this depends on the bit depth of the audio. Higher bit depths give you a greater dynamic range and thus a lower digital minimum. In the case of our 16-bit audio, our digital minimum is around negative 96.3 dB. Here is the equation used to obtain this if you're interested. Something to note is that dBFS is a logarithmic scale, so the levels are further apart towards the bottom of the dynamic range and get closer and closer together as you approach 0 dB. What if we were to count the number of samples that occupy each discrete dBFS level? In doing so, we could obtain a histogram that portrays the distribution of samples across the dynamic range of the audio, and this is what we obtain by doing this. I don't know about you, but this representation leaves a lot to be desired. I want to make this look prettier by using brighter shades to represent levels with more samples and darker shades to represent levels with less samples. And this is what we get by doing that. This provides a visual representation of the audio's loudness and dynamic range, as demonstrated by the following examples. These can be produced for different bit depth versions of a given audio. Note the dynamic range increase as bit depth increases. But we're just getting started. There's a lot more we can do here. Virtually every piece of music we interact with in the year of our Lord 2026 is stereo audio. There's a left channel and a right channel that have two different audio signals. We can create different plots for each channel and a merge plot that combines both. Additionally, we can use the two channels to derive a mid signal, which is the sum of the two channels, and a side signal, which is the difference between the two channels. Mid represents the mono elements of the audio, the dead center elements, and side represents the stereo elements of the audio, the width, the depth. Mid-side sheds light on the stereo image of the song. Take a look and a listen at how our plots change in response to the following audio samples. To summarize, we started with a digital audio waveform, transformed the amplitudes to dBFS, plotted the distribution of samples across each dBFS level, then represented this histogram through brighter and darker shades. With stereo audio, we can create plots for the left and right channels or the mid and side channels. But there is still even more we can do here. So far, we have been using the entire song to produce our plots, but what if we created multiple plots corresponding to different time windows within the audio and stuck all these plots together? By doing so, we would be able to see how the audio loudness and dynamic range changes over time. This is dynamics over time, and by increasing the number of time windows, we can increase the resolution of our plot. We don't even have to look at the entire song, we can zoom in on specific time segments. Additionally, songs are made up of a multitude of constituent frequencies that stretch across the entire range of human hearing. We can limit these constituent frequencies to a specific range of our choosing, create an altered version of our song with only that frequency band, and use this to create a dynamics over time plot only for our specified frequency range. Check out the following examples. So far, we've been creating plots that show how the dynamics of a song unfold over time. But we can also create plots that show how dynamics unfold over frequency, that is, with frequency on the x-axis instead of time. First, we create altered versions of our song that are made up only of specific frequency bands, similar to before. However, this time, we create one plot for each, corresponding to the entirety of each band-limited audio. By sticking these plots together, we will be able to see how the audio loudness and dynamic range changes as a function of frequency. This is dynamics over frequency, and once again, by increasing the number of windows, we can increase the resolution of our plot. I'd also like to point out that you can actually see where the bass drops off in the side channel. This song, like many others, was mixed so that bass frequencies are mono. Also, we don't have to look at the entire human audible range, we can also zoom in on specific frequency segments. Now I'm going to play some audio clips, one of which is the original song, the others different versions that have had their frequency content altered in some way. Take a look at how the plots change according to the different variations. Up until now, we've been looking at plots that show the entire dynamic range of the audio on the y-axis, but as you can see, that leaves a lot of useless empty space towards the bottom of the dynamic range. The good news is that we can zoom in on a specific dB range, highlighting extremely fine details that could never be resolved otherwise. We can do this for both our time and frequency plots. We can use these plots to compare two pieces of music. In this example, we have a whole spectrum time plot and a frequency plot for my song, the instrumental one you've been hearing, and Birds of a Feather by Billie Eilish. Let's say I wanted my song to sound more like Birds of a Feather. Well, I could use these plots to see how they differ with incredible precision, and adjust my song accordingly. Some things that immediately jump out. In our time plot, Birds of a Feather has far greater mid-side separation, and that makes sense. My song is an instrumental with a prominent piano and synth that are both very wide. Birds of a Feather is a more stripped back, minimal piece where the prominent elements are more central, vocals, bass, drums. If we look at our frequency plots, Birds of a Feather has a U-shaped curve with a prominent bass and high end, while my song is more of an arc with a prominent mid-range. Birds of a Feather is a lot quieter in the rumble, deep sub-bass frequencies, perhaps contributing to its exceptional clarity. Additionally, although both pieces have mid-side separation in the bass frequencies, Birds of a Feather's separation persists beyond 200 Hz, whereas mine stops a little over 100 Hz. I also find it interesting how Birds of a Feather has mid-side separation in the high end. My theory is that this is due to the vocal, a prominent mono element that would contribute substantially to this part of the spectrum. It also appears that Birds of a Feather's mid-range is more compressed than mine. The area just looks a bit denser to my eye. In conclusion, from a mere digital audio waveform, we can produce a plot that visually represents its dynamics. We can analyze how these dynamics change over time, for the entire frequency spectrum or for specific frequency bands of our choosing. We can also analyze how these dynamics change as a function of frequency. Finally, we can choose a left-right or mid-side output. Taken together, these plots bring exceptional clarity to the dynamics of a song, and how these dynamics unfold with respect to the song's frequency content and stereo image, allowing you to investigate any piece of music or fine-tune your song's sound with surgical precision. That's all for now. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it. Thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye.